Again, welcome to CS 101, Introduction to Programming Using Python. This lab will cover Chapter 5 of our course textbook. Our main objective is to solve two problems using Python user-defined function concept. So our first question is, in this chapter, you saw an example of how to write an algorithm that determines whether a number is even or odd number. Again, we solve a problem whereby we use the modulus operator to determine if the number is an even number or an odd number. And we said that anytime you divide a value by 2 and the remainder is 0, any value by 2 and the remainder is 0, that means it's an even number. Now, when the remainder is 1, that means it's an odd number. But this time, we are going to write a program that will generate 100 random numbers and keep a count of how many of those numbers are even numbers and also how many of those numbers are odd numbers. Here, our main goal is to use the Python user-defined function. So we have to write a function, and then later, again, we call the function in the main method. So this is our main method. Again, we start with the keyword def, and the function name is main. Again, the main method or the main function is where the executions take place. Now, since we are going to generate a random numbers, we import the class or the package random. So import random. The goal here is because we are going to use the random class to generate random numbers. So we have a couple of variables here. The first variable will tell us the number, the current number. So we call the variable name current number. Also, the second variable will give us the odd counter. So the number of odd numbers we have, we are going to store it in the odd counter variable. Also, the even counter is the number of even numbers we have. We are going to store it in the even counter variable. Then also the total numbers. The total numbers are 100 because the question said we should generate 100 random numbers. And again, so those are the variables we are going to use. The most important, we have the odd counter and the even counter. We have got these two variables. We keep track of the number of odd numbers and even numbers we have. So first thing we do here is to generate our random number. So we use a for loop first. Then we say for counter in range total numbers. Now the total numbers is 100. Again, we declare a variable named total numbers and we initialize it or assign 100 to it. So anytime we use the variable total numbers, it means we are using the 100, the content of it. So this for loop is going to generate 100 numbers from 0 to 99. The range function 100 means 0 to 99. So we use our method named randint. So we have the random.randint, and we are going to generate again any 100 numbers, and it's from 1 to 1000. Now the next, after we generate each number, we are going to check if the number is even number or odd number. So for example, again, for loop will be executed one at a time. So the first number, we went through the for loop once. We generate again one value. We store the value in a variable named current number. So now we check if the number is odd or even. So we say if it's even, the current number, then we're going to increment the variable even counter. So even counter plus equal 1 means even counter equal to even counter plus 1. Initially, the even counter is 0. The odd counter also is 0. We can see those two variables here. Odd counter is 0. Even counter is 0. So we are using the for loop and we're going to use it 100 times. We generate a number. Anytime we generate a number, we check whether it's even or odd. If it's even, we increment the even counter variable. If it's odd, we increment the odd. Then we will go through, this statement is in the for loop. So we shall go through this 100 times before we come out of the for loop. Then we will come and print out of the total numbers, which is 100, random numbers, whatever we have for the odd counter, let's say 44, then we'll say it's 44 were odd, and then the rest then will be 56. 56 were even. So again, depends on because these numbers are going to be generated randomly. So any number that is generated randomly, we check if it's even or odd. Then if it's even, we add 1 to the even counter. If it's odd, we add 1 to the odd counter. Then we will come and print our result. Now you can see that here we have a function name is even, because we call this function is even, and its argument is current number. So this is what we are learning in this chapter. We have our user-defined function called is even. So its even function return true if a number is even, false if it's odd. So that's why if we check here, if condition, if it's true, we execute. Anytime the else section means if the condition is false, then else we execute. So here we have, again, the keyword def to start the user-defined function. The function name is even. The argument is number. This is the number we are going to check. This number also represents the current number. So here we say that if the number modulus 2 equal to 0, then we return true, else we return false. Then we call the main function to execute. So let's try the second question. The second question says we should write a function named mass that accepts 2 integer values as argument, and then it's going to return the value that is greater of the 2. So this means we are going to write our own user-defined function named mass. This function takes 2 numbers, so we can make the argument 2 values. Then we say if the first value is greater than the second value, then return the first value. Else we return the second value. So we can see the function here. The function name is Massimo. It takes 2 argument, number 1, number 2, because that's what the question said. The function accepts 2 integer values as arguments and return the value that is greater of the 2. So here we say that if number 1 is greater than number 2, then return 1, which is the number 1. Else we return num2. Again, num1 and num2 are variables. So we are going to enter the inputs for those 2 variables. So again, we have our main function def main. We have the column. We declare 2 variables, num1 and num2. We initialize it to 0. Then we ask the user to enter the 2 numbers. Enter num1, then enter num2. Then we can display the result here. The maximum number is, we call the function Massimo with the 2 arguments num1 and num2. Now the Massimo is the user-defined function we have to write. So this is the function here. We say the Massimo function returns the maximum of the 2 numbers it returns, receive as argument. So we have def Massimo num1, num2. If num1 is greater than num2, then return num1, else return num2. Then we call the main function or invoke the main function. And as we said in the lectures, execution starts from the main function. So when we execute this program first, and the program will initialize the num1 and num2 variables to 0, then ask the user to enter the 2 numbers. When the user enters the 2 numbers, we have a display here that the maximum number is. Python saw a function because we have an identifier name with open and close parentheses, so it's a function. And so Python will get the function here and replace those 2 values in. Let's say we have 5 and 7. So num1 is 5, num2 is 7. So we check if num1 greater than num2, no. So we are not going to return num1, but we return num2. So this code here always to return the maximum value. Let's say if num1 is 10 and num2 is 20, then this condition will be false. 10 is greater than 20, not false. So we are going to return num2, which is the 20. Now, if we have 1 and 6, or let's say 6 and 1. Is 6 greater than 1? Yes, then we'll return num 1. If it's 1 and 6, then we are going to return num 2 because 6 is num 2. So that will be the conclusion for these lectures. Again, these lectures, we continue with chapter 5 lab work, how to, again, write our own user-defined functions, how to use the main functions in a Python. Again, see you in the next lectures. Thank you for your time.